Hey neighbor, we're talking about onions, growing onions. Specifically, we're going to be talking about today is weed control in onions. Now we're planting our short day onions in November, so it's fixing to be time to be thinking about how we're going to keep those onions clean, weed free. But these same strategies I'm talking about today apply to whether you grow an intermediate day or long day onions anywhere in the country. Same strategy. And I'm simply going to show you what works for me, what tools I use, and the way I do things. Now, I put my onions on drip tape, but let me just state right up front, there's more onions grown off without drip tape than they are on drip tape. So by no means think you got to use drip tape. It simply works best for me. I can water when I want to. I can shoot my fertility through there. Now I don't have to worry about as much of a weed problem out in the middles because I'm not watering the middles. But overhead irrigation is used more for growing onions than drip tape is. So just do a disclaimer about it up front. You don't have to use drip tape. If it works for you, fine. If you don't have the capacity to do that, you can still grow a mighty fine crop of onions with overhead irrigation. Okay, let's talk about row spacing and distance between rows real quick here. I'm planting on drip tape, so I planted on 12-inch spacing here because I want to be right on top of those emitters. You could do as much as 6-inch spacing and be fine there. I'm simply working with my drip tape there. All right, now distance in between rows there on onions. Onions don't take up a lot of room there. You really just want to base this on what works for you as far as cultivation. 24 inches will work. If you're using something like a wheel hoe, you can still get in there and cultivate them. 30-inch rows will work. That's basically what I got is 30-inch rows, or even as much as 36-inch rows, if that works for your equipment. So when setting up your row spacing, think about what equipment you're going to use to get in there and cultivate it and keep those weeds out. And that'll dictate your row spacing. If you're doing intensive stuff and you got the equipment to do it, 24-inch rows work fine. All right, so I let these weeds get just a little bit big on me, but I'm gonna give you an idea of what we're looking at here. These little bitty weeds is just now starting to come up. If you can see at the edge of the point right there, we call them weeds in the thread stage. I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about there if I can find one. Yep, see it right here? That little white root on there, if you can see with the dirt on there, that is the ideal time to control weeds in the thread stage. And the thread means when you go in there and cultivate them, you'll see those little white threads, white roots sticking up. That is the ideal way to control them. You get them young, easy to cultivate and not disturb your plants much. But if they get a little bit bigger on up from you like this right here, it's still doable, but that's not necessarily called the thread stage. But we can still control them at this point. What we don't want them to do is get any bigger than this, because then we start disrupting the soil more than we need to, and the weeds get ahead of us and get a hold of us, and they start taking nutrients and water away from our onions, and that's what we don't like. We like to keep them clean. Now, onions are one of those crops we have to grow pretty much all winter long here in the South. Short day varieties I'm talking specifically. We plant in November, we harvest in spring, so we have a lot of winter weed pressure on there. So to get in there and keep them clean is really important. And we're gonna go over some of those strategies right now. Now the weeds in between the onion plants in the rows, the hardest to control because we're having to deal with our drip tape for me, and also our onions, we don't want to damage those. The ones out here in the row, they're gonna be easier for us to control. But to start with, when I first see my weeds coming up in my onion plants, I like to use an implement called the plows. You're gonna find this a little strange here because we normally use these plows for things we want to heal, such as potatoes and corn. But I like to use them on my first cultivation on my onions. Now I don't go in there as aggressive as I do on my corn and cover them up. But I do like to come through there and just push a little dirt to them and cover up a lot of those weeds. I find this to be a huge benefit on the first round of cultivation for my onions. All right, so we covered up a lot of those weeds that was right there on the edge here, and we got fairly close here. If you'll notice, we didn't throw much soil to the onion plant there because we don't want to do that. Unlike corn and potatoes, we don't want to throw soil there to that. We just want to get fairly close, take out some of those weeds. Now we still got a few weeds. You see right here, you can see with that shadow. Still got a few weeds there in the middle that we didn't get to with the wheel hoe. So I'm gonna take this single tine cultivator. Now I'm gonna turn it on the edge because I got drip tape buried underneath it, and I don't want to damage that drip tape. If you don't have drip tape, you can get real aggressive with it. But I'm gonna turn it around sideways there, go in there, just take those weeds out like that. choke up on that handle. I'll run down through the rows, take care of those weeds just like that right there. All right, so we got our weeds right here that's in our path, in our middles here. We got to take out. There's a couple different options, probably about 3 different options we can use to do that. I'll show you the one I like the best. All right, so on my single wheel hoe, I've got the sweeps and the cultivator tooth set up on there. I like my sweeps because they're kind of aggressive. They got that tilt to them that's going to throw those weeds up and uproot them. They sharp, cover a lot of ground, and I can go through there fairly quickly. The problem with the sweeps is we got a gap in there. We're going to compensate for that gap in there by putting this one single tine cultivator in there to take care of that. If you've got some 36-inch rows, you're probably going to have to go down on each side there. If you got a 24-inch row, probably one trip down through there to get them. But you can see they're busting those weeds up real good. Nice and easy to do, just kind of run through there and pop them up. The good thing about the sweeps is I can get fairly close to that plant. But I want to be careful because I don't want to get too close and cut off my onions. So I use my plows in my first go around to heel up, if you might say, around those onions there to help control my weeds. But I don't want to continue to do that because I don't want to mound around my onions. So the next time I go through there, I will take my high arc and set up my sweep so I can straddle the row right there. What that's going to do is going to take care of the weeds right around those plants. It's also going to take some of that soil that I mounded up last time and bust it back away and take them away from my onions. All right, so that would be our second time we cultivated. We start having weeds come back in, we'd use our sweeps. And you can see right here, gets pretty close there. All we'd have to do is come in here and take our single tine cultivator, clean up a few of those weeds in the middle there that we couldn't get to. Well, I think a wheel hoe is the perfect tool for growing onions and garlic for weed control there. Find the combination of attachments that works best for you and your soils. I showed you today what works best for me. I have kind of a sandy loam soil. I could come out here in no time weeding my garden patch. I don't have those weeds competing for nutrients and water for my onions. Helps me to grow those big old jumbo sweet onions. Keeps my garden nice and clean. The wheel hoe, perfect tool for that.